The Mississippi, America's lifeline. A force of nature so powerful, it seems eternal, carving its path through the heart of a continent for millennia. But in the winter of 1811, the unthinkable happened. The water stopped. The riverbed, a place of unseen depths and constant motion, lay bare. Giant fish were left stranded, flopping on the mudflats under a cold winter sky. And then, in a moment that defied all logic and experience, the water began to flow backward. It wasn't a drought that caused this. It wasn't a man-made dam. It was the earth itself, seemingly trying to tear America in two. Imagine the Mississippi River, not as the broad, steady artery of commerce we know today, but as a wild and tame frontier. This was the river in 1811, the main highway for a young nation pushing westward. Flatboats laden with goods navigated its unpredictable currents, and small settlements clung to its banks, their existence entirely dependent on its flow. The people who lived along its shores knew the river's moods, its floods, its shifting channels, its snags and sandbars. They thought they had seen all its power. They were wrong. On December 16, 1811, just after 2 in the morning, a deep, terrifying rumble started, not from the sky, but from the ground beneath their feet. Near the small frontier town of New Madrid, in what is now Missouri, a massive, hidden fault line deep within the Earth's crust violently erupted. This wasn't just another tremor. It was the opening salvo of what would become the most powerful series of earthquakes in the recorded history of the contiguous United States. The initial shock was estimated to be around a magnitude 7.5, but this was only the beginning. For the next 3 months, the ground would rarely be still. The quakes came in waves, a relentless assault from the planet itself. The sky over the dense forests turned dark and heavy, filled with the dust and debris thrown into the air. The ground began to buckle and crack open. Fissures, some stretching for miles, tore across the landscape, swallowing entire trees in an instant. For those on the river, the scene was apocalyptic. The mighty Mississippi was transformed into a churning cauldron. Boats were not just rocked. They were tossed into the air by massive waves that appeared from nowhere. Waves we now call fluvial tsunamis. Eyewitness accounts from flatboat captains describe the river rising up like a mountain, then collapsing, sucking their vessels down into swirling vortexes. The banks of the river caved in, taking huge sections of forest with them, creating a logjam of debris that stretched for miles. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur as the fractured earth vented gases from below. The sheer power was incomprehensible. These shockwaves weren't just a local event. They radiated outward with astonishing force, ringing church bells in Boston, cracking sidewalks in Washington, D.C., and reportedly waking President James Madison in his bed at the White House, over 800 miles away from the epicenter. It was a geological event on a continental scale, a moment when the very foundations of the nation shook. The most bizarre and terrifying spectacle was yet to come. As the ground violently rose and fell during the most intense quakes, it literally reshaped the landscape in a matter of hours. In some areas, the land was pushed upwards by as much as 30 feet. In others, it sank, creating vast, swampy depressions. This dramatic change in elevation had a direct and mind-bending effect on the Mississippi River. The upward thrust of the land near the southern end of the fault zone created a temporary dam. The river, its natural downhill path suddenly blocked, had nowhere to go but backward. For several hours, the Mississippi River, a symbol of relentless, one-way power, actually ran upstream. This reverse flow was not a gentle redirection. It was a torrent, as the river rushed to fill the new, sunken basins created by the quakes. In northwestern Tennessee, this geological chaos carved out an entirely new landmark overnight. The land dropped, and the backward-flowing Mississippi poured in, creating the 15,000-acre body of water we now know as Reelfoot Lake. An entire ecosystem, a massive lake, was born from the violence of the earth in just a few hours. For the few people who witnessed this, it must have seemed like the end of the world. The laws of nature had been suspended. The river, their constant, their guide, their source of life, had turned against them. The sheer scale of this transformation is hard to wrap our heads around even today, a testament to the immense and often hidden forces at work right under our feet. In 1812, the Mississippi wasn't just a river, it was the internet, the interstate highway system, and the supply chain of the American West all rolled into one. The economic lifeblood of the frontier flowed on its currents, so when the New Madrid earthquakes struck, they didn't just destroy land and terrorize the population. They dealt a crippling blow to the young nation's economy. The river, the primary artery for trade and transportation, became virtually impassable for months. The channel was choked with uprooted trees and rearranged with new, uncharted sandbars and rapids. Entire islands had disappeared, while new ones had risen from the depths, flatboats. The 18-wheelers of their day were wrecked by the thousands. Their valuable cargo lost to the churning waters. The destruction on land was just as severe. Thousands of acres of valuable timber forest were leveled, flattened as if by a giant hand. Farmland was rendered useless, either sunk into swampland or covered in sterile sand that had been violently ejected from the earth through sand blows. The landscape of the Midwest was permanently altered, scarred in ways that are still visible from space today if you know where to look. This disruption couldn't have come at a worse time. The United States was on the brink of war with Great Britain, the War of 1812, and this internal crisis severely hampered the movement of troops and supplies. The New Madrid earthquakes were a national security crisis and an economic disaster, demonstrating just how fragile the young republic's infrastructure truly was. It was a stark reminder that progress and prosperity were ultimately at the mercy of the natural world. Today, the Mississippi flows peacefully at sunset, a picture of calm and stability. But the scars of 1812 remain, etched into the land and into our history. We live on a restless giant, a planet of immense power that operates on timescales far beyond our own. The New Madrid quakes were not a singular event but a warning from history, a message from the deep earth that the ground beneath us is not as solid as it seems. It's a warning that scientists and engineers are still trying to fully understand, as millions of people now live and work atop that same, sleeping fault line. The story of the day the river ran backward reminds us that history is not just about human actions, but also about the profound and sometimes terrifying power of the planet we call home. This is the Empire of History. Subscribe to keep uncovering the moments that shook the world.